Today, March 18th, 2021, I, Maya Hill, the interviewer, will be interviewing Miss Martina Johnson Allen. Location is over Zoom. This interview will be for the Oral History Project, the Black Student Alumni Oral History Project. So welcome, Miss Martina. I want to say thank you for joining me today to be interviewed for this project and share in some of the experiences that you had at Penn State. So just to jump right in, we're going to start with the basics of, can you just tell us where you were born and when you were born?
I was born in 1947 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in an area called South Philadelphia. That's the area in which I lived.
So how was growing up? Was your community all African American? What were the dynamics of your childhood and just like, how you grew up?
Well, my community was very segregated, and it was very overtly segregated because I can look across the street and see where the white folks lived, and I noticed that the black folks lived where I lived. And but however, my school in South Philadelphia was integrated.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very good experience. However, when I was 7, we moved to West Philadelphia. And then the neighborhood in West Philadelphia was very segregated. In fact, I didn't go to an integrated school until I went to Penn State as a freshman. That was my first encounter with students other than African-American students.
So how was that experience when you saw that overt type of, kind of racism and segregation? Like how did your parents kind of teach you how to deal with those things? And although you went to an African-American school, like high school, middle school, elementary school, what was the dynamics in you being able to see like, oh, wait, we can't mingle, we can't talk. I can't talk with other white people, or, white people don't like me, so we can't hang out, etc.
Well, I really didn't think that way. I don't know. Maybe it's because I was extremely naive. I just thought that's the way the world was.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Martin Luther King talked about going to an amusement park, and he was not allowed to go. And he said, "I'm going to do something about this. This is wrong." I didn't think about whether it was right or wrong. I just thought that was the way life was.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so interesting about how people perceive things. They could perceive things as right or wrong and do something about it, or they could say, "Well, this is the way it is," and just go forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I admire him so, because he brought it to our attention that no, things aren't supposed to be the way you see them. That's
Mm-hmm.
not right, and you're supposed to question everything that's in your environment.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I met him when I was in junior high school.
Wow, how was that experience?
Oh, it was awesome. But the older I got, the more I realized how important it was. Because when you're young
Mm-hmm.
and sort of like immature, I guess you just think things happen. You don't realize the significance of things. But
Mm-hmm.
when I told my students that I met Martin Luther King and shook his hand, they said, "Well, how old are you?"
Yeah.
Because a young person like Martin Luther King lived years and years ago.
Yeah.
So when I meet someone who actually came into contact with them, they're really amazed. I like to see the looks on their faces.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm just like, wow, that is like honorable. You got to shake his hand, like,
Yeah.
One of like a hero to many. So just to talk about your elementary school, your middle
Yeah.
school, high school experience, what was those experiences like? And did you feel prepared to go to college from going to an African American school? Because we know in some ways are not separate but equal, schooling was not really, equal in terms of access to a lot of different things. So what was those experiences like, and how were you molded even by going to an African American school with African American teachers and having that support system kind of that you probably needed growing up?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about segregated schools, you often don't have just African American teachers. See, that's so paradoxical. You have a great deal, maybe the majority of European descent teachers,
Mm-hmm.
and especially on the high school level. And my parents were very liberal, and it was always an understanding that I would go to college.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, "Do you want to go?" Just going. And my dad took me out to a trip to Cheney. Are you familiar with Cheney?
Yes.
Yes. So and he said, well, this is where you're going when you graduate from high school. So I already had a school pinpointed, but I happened to go to Penn State. I think because they were least expensive.
Mm-hmm.
With the African American schools, you had to apply early because everybody wanted to go. So they filled up quickly, and as an out of state student, I was considered last. So I went to Penn State, but my transition to Penn State was racially was very easy because it was during that time when people were trying, the
Mm-hmm.
late '60s. People were really trying during that time.
So how did
To
you end up hearing about Penn State, knowing that your your dad took you on a trip to an HBCU? I guess considered one of the first HBCUs, and you
Yeah,
know, you already having had attended all African American schooling throughout your
yeah,
whole entire life. So
right.
what made you kind of? I know you said Penn State was cheaper, but how did Penn State kind of surface on your radar? And like who told you about Penn State?
I think my brother told me that when I was making applications. He said, "Well, why don't you try Penn State? You might get a better chance because you're an in-state student and it's cheaper." So I was thinking about, because who would accept me because of the number of people who are applying, and of
Mm-hmm.
course, cost and distance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and plus, Penn State had a very good reputation
Mm-hmm.
for their curriculum, especially their art and education curriculum, had a very good reputation. And they were, well, during that time, as culturally diverse as you could get at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and oh, and I also had access to Ogon's campus, which is right down the street.
Mm-hmm. So when
And
you oh,
it
go
was
ahead.
more convenient at that time.
Okay.
But I always missed an opportunity to go to an all Black university because they also have a lot of hidden treasures too, like their museums. Like Hampton has a beautiful art museum with a vast collection of artists, that their collection of works that they hold.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like Tanner
Wow.
and favorite painting, the banjo player. They own that. That's in their museum. Like there are millions of copies of the banjo player. I have one in here. I don't know if I took it down or not, probably faded, but Hampton has the original version, original painting of
Wow.
a banjo player.
Wow.
Yeah,
So when you got on to, we're going to transition just to when you got to, the campus at Penn State. You went
yeah,
to Ogon's campus for 2 years, you mentioned. So how was that transition? Because going to a Commonwealth is definitely
yeah.
different than going to the main campus. So when you transitioned, did you live at home, or were you a on-campus student?
Oh, I was an on-campus student and very happy to get away from home because I was like a homebody. So going away to college to me was like very liberating.
Hmm.
And I was just very happy about it. And there were, like I said, so many programs, so many things to do. But I majored in elementary education. I wish I hadn't because that sort of like limited my exposure to different disciplines.
Hmm. So how many African American students were a part of like your introductory freshman class when you got to Ogon's campus? Because Ogon's was right outside of the Philadelphia area, I believe. And
Right.
um, did you attend Penn State? Like, did you start like 1966, or was it
Hmm.
65?
Well, let's say I graduated in '69.
Okay, so
So
65.
yeah,
Yeah.
I must have started. And I from high school, yes, '65. Yeah, so during that time, which is a very turbulent period during that time. A
Hmm.
lot of things were going on socially,
Hmm.
you
So
know.
So how did that the things that were going on within, the society, like the nation at that time, a lot of upheaval, how did that kind of also influence your experience at Penn State on the Ogon's campus? And then when you moved to the main campus, like how did the outside racial tensions kind of influence your experience on the campus, and even within the classrooms, if you had any experiences of discrimination or
Yeah.
Any realization that like I need to, become an activist, or I need to become involved in different organizations to,
Mhm.
bring forth change to the university, but also, you know, uh, kind of just going with the wave of things, like for a lot of universities at that time, a lot of student
Yeah.
activism.
Well, I just felt like I needed to become more aware. I need to be more conscious of the world in general, because I think I live basically a very sheltered life. And I just wanted to find out what was going on with
Hmm.
everybody. So I would join some organizations like, I can't think of the name of the organization, but they were very international.
Hmm.
They weren't for one group, they were just an international group. For instance, I was thinking about the other day, I was taking some notes, and I thought about the jazz club that Penn State had, and they concentrated on music and the musicians. See, I needed to be where people would not just deal with someone's ethnicity, but with the arts in particular, like what people are doing, because the arts draw people together.
Hmm.
So and then I joined some of the dance clubs. And in Philadelphia, I was very interested in Philadanto. Have you heard of Philadanto?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, but I just, I don't know what young people are thinking nowadays.
I don't think I heard of Arthur Hall, but I have
Arthur
heard of Phil.
Hall was a very prominent African dance instructor in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
Yes, and then came Philadanto, and then of course the New York scene
Hmm.
took with I can't think of his name, but from New York, but yeah. So Philadelphia at one time, well, I guess still now, I don't keep up, but they had a very strong cultural connection.
Hmm.
So we had the dance with Arthur Hall, and we still have Philadanto. And I was involved, not greatly with them, but I was involved with them. Like I either attend a performance or do a workshop, but I didn't become a serious dancer. I wanted to, but back in the day, if you weren't white, you just couldn't see yourself fitting in.
Hmm.
Today, people can see themselves fitting in. We didn't have that when I was a young person, and that's very important to get the visuals. You have to see somebody who looks like yourself
Hmm.
fitting in, and I
Yeah.
didn't have that, and it's very important.
Yeah. So in not having that experience, even on I'll say even within the campus experience, because when you got to main campus, I'm believing if you stayed at um the Commonwealth branch for 2 years, then you transition to Penn State 68 or
Yeah,
60, about
68.
68. Yeah. So
Yeah.
68. So jumping to 68, when you get on main campus, what is that experience like? How is it different from the Ogons campus? And then what were some of the similarities that you kind of realized?
Well, I just love being around people my age and away from adults and being independent. I just love that.
Hmm.
And meeting, having so many options uh, so far as what to study. But nobody mentioned like nobody talked about computer science,
Hmm.
to females. And I said, it's so wrong because I would have majored in computer science if I felt like I fit in.
Hmm.
But nobody even discussed it.
Hmm.
Or anthropology. Now that I visit the University of Penn Museum all the time and go to their workshops, one teacher said, "Oh, you think this way because you have the heart of an anthropologist." I said, "I wish somebody had told me that when I was at Penn State. I would have taken some classes in anthropology."
Hmm.
So I guess like that, that old expression, "Youth is wasted on the young."
Wow. This is
So
my
much
first time
you
hearing
don't
that.
know, huh?
This is my first time hearing that.
Yeah, so much. When you're young, you have an opportunity to be exposed to so much, but you don't know anything until you get older.
Hmm.
So, if if I had thought about that while I was at Penn State, I would have studied in anthropology.
Hmm.
I think. In other words, Penn State has they have a vast collection of classes to teach. I have to say that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't know what's going on, you're not going to go forward unless you have a very strong counseling department. And I don't really know if they had that, especially for African American students. Maybe they really need to work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Have to realize that when the students walk on campus, there's a lot that you need to tell them that they can do.
Mm-hmm.
You know what they're capable of doing. I don't know
Yeah.
if they do it now, but I think that's I think that's what they need to work on.
Yeah, that's that, I kind of think about the 13 demands that were, made through the Douglas Association about having more African American counselors in the
Yeah,
60s for, not just within the 60s, but for African American students to advance at Penn State's campus. So I kind of want to touch, oh, go ahead.
no, I'm just saying, right. I agree.
Oh, I kind of wanted to jump to kind of the montage, which was 68 and May of
Mhm.
68. And then also I wanted to kind of highlight um, Dr. Martin Luther King's Jr.'s assassination. And when you heard that news, what was your reaction and how did you feel as an African American student on campus, knowing that you got an opportunity to meet
Yeah,
him, and then like
yeah,
you find out that he was assassinated, and
yeah,
again going back to that idea, the racial turmoil that was so heightened and
mm,
at a climactic point within the nation, but also on a lot of universities campuses for African American
yeah.
students.
Well, unfortunately, with a person like Martin Luther King, you always live in fear. You always think you're going to wake up one morning and hear that news. Just like President Obama,
Hmm.
you always say, okay, one day we're going to wake up and hear this news. So it's always that fear that one day you're going to wake up and hear this news. That's the downside of having a prominent African American in leadership position.
Hmm.
You're just so afraid for their lives. And so I was shocked, but wasn't totally shocked because I just knew what's going to happen one day. And we all felt a great sense of loss, but we also felt a great sense of responsibility to carry on.
Hmm.
So now everything is in our laps, and we just have to just carry on and really think about what he actually wanted us to do, because I think it was misunderstood in many ways.
Hmm. Did you find yourself going to any of the protests or demonstrations where did you participate in? Did you consider yourself a student activist? Because I think that in some way or another, through your artwork, um, you kind of, well, on the campus, I'll say, when you created the cover of the magazine for the Black Arts Fest, that also was another demonstration of, activism in some form or way or another. So what events did you attend, if you attended any demonstrations or any protests? And then also, did you see yourself as an activist?
I mean, at Penn State,
Yes, at Penn State.
yeah. Well, there's so few of us. We all attended all of them. We. But the only thing about our Black student community is that we were so divided. Like sororities and fraternities really didn't work for us because that isolated us, and then that isolated us from the independent people. So I really couldn't understand why we did that, why they had that at Penn State's campus.
Hmm.
The sororities and fraternities and this and that, because there were so few of us in the first place. We just couldn't afford that.
Hmm.
But I think during the Black student movement, we sort of like pushed the fraternity and sorority thing aside and came together.
Hmm.
And the so-called independent people, we just like got together. So I think it worked for us as an African American community, that it took away the divisiveness
Hmm.
that existed. Yes.
Yeah. So how did your artwork? So I know you are an artist, so we want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about your artwork. And so majoring in, as you mentioned, you thought you wanted to major in art. You wish you had the opportunity to major in art, but you major in secondary education. So
Mm-hmm.
how were you able to still display your artsy side at Penn State? And like I said, mentioning the Black Arts Fest when I think it was I believe it was 69 when it was Aquarius. because I actually saw a picture of it and it has your name on the bottom of it. So
Uh-huh.
how were you selected for that? And then how did you kind of like use your creativity and your artistic skills to, you know, create such a beautiful magazine or front cover for the magazine?
Well, every idea always starts with one person.
Mm-hmm.
So the festival started with Cynthia Cotton. I forgot her married name. You
Yes,
contacted Cynthia.
yes,
Shelley Todd, who's deceased now. Have they talked about Shelley yet?
yes, they mentioned her too.
And myself, the three of us, we were roommates, so to speak.
Were you in
So
AKA as well?
everybody has different perspective, but I think that the three of us started it.
Uh-huh.
Somebody else may say they started it, but I think the three of us came up with that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, being an artist, I was just selected because it was just the three of us at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I did the art. That's how I was chosen because, as far as I'm concerned, the three of us started it.
Mm-hmm. Well, now were you in AKA as well?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
and I said reluctantly because during the civil rights movement, it wasn't very a popular thing to be divisive like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we all associated together,
Mm-hmm.
and especially behind that event.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that me, Shelley, and Cynthia created the event. I
Yeah.
don't know what
No,
somebody
that
else
was
would say.
mentioned. It was mentioned in the other interview, so you're right on. No one
Oh,
said anything. Yeah, no one said anything else. No one said it was themselves. Everyone kind of said like, yes, they had the idea, and
yeah,
starting with the montage, from the montage, and then
yeah,
it birthed the Black Arts Fest. So,
right.
um, what was your favorite event at the Black Arts Fest, if you had any, or if it
Well,
was the whole thing was your favorite?
well, um, I enjoyed well, we had so many people come in, and what amazed me is that prominent artists agreed to visit our campus
Mm-hmm.
and perform. For us of all people. I mean, who were we? But they came to perform. I was amazed.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it seemed like an amazing time, but as I've mentioned to the other interviews, the Black Arts Fest kind of like spiraled to the Arts Fest that they have annually at Penn State in July. I don't know if you heard of it, but they have an Arts Fest in the summer, and where artists and people come up, and it's like a fun time. So,
Oh,
kind of,
go ahead.
would you say?
A general art festival?
Yeah, it's just like it's called Arts Festival. It's
Oh
not
yeah,
called Black Arts
I'm
Festival.
familiar with that one. Yeah, the general
Yeah,
art festival. Yes.
yeah, I think the Black Arts Fest kind of died away, probably like 70s, 80s, because I
Mm.
didn't see much more information about the Black
Yeah.
Arts Fest when I was doing the research. But
Mm.
I do want to kind of like tailor into um you going into art and you becoming this artist, who is
Mm.
I mean, from looking at your work, I would consider you world renowned. And your work being,
Well,
you know,
thank you.
I mean, very well. And some of the things that I don't know if that is your work behind you, but a lot of
Yes,
your
some
art
of it
people
is.
have been in a lot of important places
Yeah.
and has come back to Penn State. So let's start. Where did you, or when did you realize that, art was really the thing that you wanted to do? Because you
Mm.
were, in education. So when did you kind of shift to say, no, I'm going to focus my career, my time on my artwork?
Mhm. Well, I think I always have from the cradle, but I also knew that, well, especially during my time, that you couldn't really make you possibly could not make an income
Hmm.
with art. And I also had two hearts. I had the heart of a teacher and the heart of an artist. So I thought that my teacher's art would help me financially. And then my artist's heart will just help my soul.
Hmm.
So I always had two endeavors. And I'm glad because, how the art world is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the teaching world is very rewarding.
Hmm.
The teaching fueled my art. So they were a good combination of hearts.
Now, were you an art teacher, or you just were you know, a school
I was
teacher?
a regular school teacher.
Okay.
And when I retired, I became a museum art teacher.
Oh, wow.
That was a bonus. I didn't expect that. I was just going to retire and work in my own studio. But then, see, museums and galleries and art institutions, they don't concern themselves about your credentials. They concern themselves about your art, what they
Mm-hmm.
see.
Mm-hmm.
And if they see that you're doing something they like, they'll invite you. So I've been invited to many wonderful venues to practice and teach my art, which has been a joy.
Yes. So what kind of inspired you to do some of your artworks, and also the exhibit that you had at Penn State in the Paul Robeson Culture Center? So could you talk a little bit about that? Like years later, you find yourself back at Penn State with
Yeah,
your
that was,
artwork, and now is you know it's you're being highlighted for something that you really enjoy and something that you really treasure that you get to share with other people.
well, that was really a surprise. I didn't intend to go full circle. Oh, I didn't think I would go full circle. So I was very delighted to find myself back at Penn State. I really was because that's Penn State nourished my creativity. Although I didn't major in art,
Mm-hmm.
as a minor, I participated in a lot of wonderful art programs because they had fantastic facilities,
Mm-hmm.
for art making. And I don't know how it is now, but they had it seemed like they had the largest facilities for art making.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now let's see, I forgot what I was thinking about. What was
Oh,
I
so what
thinking?
was the exhibit called at Penn State that you had? No, you're okay. It's fine. What was the exhibit called? And then kind of just like explaining a little bit about that. Like
Yeah, well, my exhibit was a traveling exhibit. I made I'm also a bookmaker. I made a catalog here.
you can show pictures too. If you
Okay, so this one was called The Gathering of Women,
mm-hmm.
and it was a traveling exhibition. I wanted it to travel throughout the world, but many people who participated developed cancer or they died and had some problems. And I developed cancer myself, so I shouldn't have let that stop me, but I did.
Mm-hmm.
One day I hope to pick it back up, but it's called The Gathering of Women, a Healing Place, 1,000 Expressions of Life. And the idea is for each woman to make her own healing sack.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a healing sack could mean many things to many people, and I was amazed at how people interpreted that idea. So Ann Shields, the curator of the gallery, I don't know if she's still the curator of the Paul Robeson Gallery now.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure.
Well, you might want to contact her if she's this. I'm talking about years ago because this show was done in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
But I forgot how she saw the show. But she invited me to participate.
Mm-hmm.
And many women from Penn State participated. They showed their works there. About 10 women who were students at Penn State were in the collection.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And then I was invited to do a solo exhibition of my a dress collection I made called Dressing the Spirit. And I made many kind of dresses, not to wear, but to express self-determination and a
Mm-hmm.
woman's inner spirit. So I really enjoyed that too. And that was also at the Paul Robeson Gallery, headed by Ann Shields. And that was done in 2004.
Wow.
And it was a great exhibition. They had a huge budget. Penn State has a huge budget
Mm-hmm.
for what they really want to do. And they really presented the show well. They did. The galleries are wonderful,
Mm-hmm.
and the publicity is fantastic. And I was treated very well.
So in returning to Penn State, like I said, as an artist, did you notice any differences? Did you, I don't know, maybe you took a chance to walk around the campus, or maybe you got a chance to interact with some people, like, meet some people, and knowing that the Paul Robeson Culture Center was
Yes.
created for a place for African American and minority students to gather. So did
Mhm.
you, like, how was the experience going back? Like, what did you feel? Did it bring back any like memories, any sad moments, or any good moments for you?
Well, I was amazed because I lived at North Halls, but now that's center campus. North Halls was on the edge of campus. So now it's the center. So Penn State has doubled in size. It's already big.
Yeah.
Doubled in size. That's, oh my goodness. And then they called it the Hub Gallery at the time. Had evolved into, and that stretched out, and then and part of it evolved to Paul Robeson Gallery. So I was very, very happy about the expansion and the naming of the galleries. And we stayed at what's the name of that hotel they have on center campus?
Is it Nittany Lion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I gotta.
When I was a student, only the adults stayed there.
It's,
when I stayed there myself, I said, "Oh."
Yeah, it's pretty fancy.
Yeah, it was amazing because when you're a student, some things are just like, "Oh, that's for you, and that's for the the serious people."
Yeah.
So it was nice being on campus again.
So I do want to jump back to the sense of community during your time as a student at Penn State's campus. You kind of mentioned how everyone kind of put their differences aside to come together as community. I also know that it was mentioned in another interview that sorority and fraternity life was also another support system and a place for they identified it as a place of like a way to survive, like having an access to other African Americans when it was so few of you guys on campus. So could you explain that community aspect for you, even being in a sorority, and why you joined a sorority? Like, what, maybe it was a family thing, or maybe you just wanted to be a part of it. Like, could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I kind of wish I hadn't, because like I said earlier, it separated me from other people, and it wasn't that many Black people in the first place. And during that time period where they had the civil rights movement, and it wasn't very a popular thing to be in a sorority or fraternity because it was divisive. Plus, it was Greek, Greek origin. So it wasn't. I think that during that time, people didn't talk about, well, I'm this and I'm that. It just wasn't a popular thing. In fact, at one point, we discussed dissolving the Greek system. We discussed that.
Wow.
But didn't happen because we didn't see any point in it. So although we were like AKA Delta, this and that, we really didn't make the distinctions. And why I joined, I think it's just because it was something to do. But my heart said, why are you doing this? Because it separated me from other people, especially the independent homosexual people, which during that time nobody talked about. But they were very great people, but they were ostracized. And we didn't know what to do about it because we didn't know that much about it. You know what I'm saying? So this divisiveness is very sinister. Like, don't associate with this person because they're this group or that gender or short or tall or this or that. That's very dangerous because you miss a lot of people. And some of the Caucasian friends I met when I was at the Commonwealth schools, I stopped associating with because I didn't have time for them. I was busy with the sorority community. So I lost them, and that's a detriment.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out how to balance things. So
yeah, I kind of asked a question.
Go ahead.
I asked a question about community because almost 40 and 50 years later, you guys still are friends. You guys still are in contact with each other. So the community aspect that you guys kind of established has remained for over like I said, 50 years, over 50 years. And it's like, wow, to see that you guys are still like, you guys still talk via phone, or you guys still have meetups, and you guys are still, good friends with one another. So being at Penn State, being an African American student during like 66 to 69 to 70, it allowed you to create lifelong bonds with people. And I think like for my experience, I do have some of those experiences. Um, but they're also a very different because the number of African Americans on campus has gotten larger. So it is
Sure.
definitely different than the experiences that you guys kind of had, and how tight that community has been. So I want to ask one more question about like activities and involvement on campus, and then jump to some of the final questions of the
Mm.
interview. So were you involved in any other activities or clubs on campus that you really enjoyed?
Well, I enjoyed the dance community,
Hmm.
or the arts community, and the music community. Like I said, they had an organization called I wrote it down. What's it called? The Jazz Club,
Hmm.
because there were so many different people. And I know you interviewed Nate Bynum.
Hmm.
He's a very interesting person. His apartment was lined with and stacked with LPs. Back in the day, we used played LPs.
Hmm.
You know what they are?
No. I'm
This
just
is I'm laughing because the language has changed too, and
Mhm.
you think because when they first started talking about CDs,
Oh, okay.
I thought kids were talking about certificates of deposit, and I was like, "Oh, it's
Oh,
so
wow.
nice." Did you see your buddy? So there's the big records, the
Okay.
LP records, and the big records you play
Hmm.
on the stereo.
Yes. I've
You,
seen
you
them
can't,
before.
yeah.
I've seen them. I didn't know the name, but I seen them before. I am a little hip.
So anyway, he had loads of them, and we would go over to his apartment, just listen to one jazz piece after another,
Hmm.
and being members of the jazz club. We that's how we all kept up with each other, and it didn't have anything to do with race
Hmm.
or which group you belong to.
Yeah. So, um, to the final questions of the interview, they're focusing on life memories and also legacy. So, I guess I would ask, um, did anyone else in your family attend Penn State after you went to Penn State? What were you excited? Was your experience so good that you recommended Penn State to go back to maybe other family members, maybe children, if you had them, or anyone else in your family?
Well, that's an interesting question because I never recommended Penn State. I still think historically black college and some of the colleges in Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
are colleges that I would prefer. Like my son's a graduate of Temple University,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is tops, and I got my degree from the University of the Arts, and then I'm studying Amharic, the language of Ethiopia, from at the University of Penn.
Wow. You're studying
So,
that now?
excuse me.
Are you studying that now?
Yeah, well, since the pandemic, I haven't been to class. But
Wow.
yes, presently, I'm so happy about that. First studying another language, and then studying a language that's very beautiful and is currently used
Mm-hmm.
in Ethiopia. Yes.
So, um,
So,
okay.
if I put, in other words, I wouldn't recommend Penn State because there's so many other schools I would recommend first, like an all-black university. Even though I didn't go myself, I would recommend that I would put that first. And then being a local, for the Philadelphia schools are just wonderful. Like I said,
Mhm.
Temple, University of Penn,
Yeah.
you know, whatever, but this is a university town.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So the next question I have for you before the final one,
Mm-hmm.
as you do this interview, as you said yes to during this interview, and as you reflect over some of the experiences that you had as a college student, what is one thing, what would you have told your 17, 18, 20, 21 year old self um about your time in college? Like, what would you have told yourself being a student looking back now?
I would have told myself to be more serious with my academic studies.
Hmm.
because now I'm an older person, have all these responsibilities. When you're a student, that's all you have to do is be a student.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd study harder and find a broader outlook on things like the anthropology
Mm-hmm.
and the computer science. I don't know why I limited it myself like that. First of all, because probably being a female and thinking, well, these things aren't for females, and then being Black, well, I don't see any Black people. You know what I mean? When you uh, don't see yourself doing things,
Mm-hmm.
that really, well, it doesn't limit you, but it does sort of like, well, is this real? Can I do this?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I wish my horizons had been broader as a college student, because that was 4 years. That's a long time of not having any other responsibilities.
Yeah.
So I would have worked harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really would have worked harder.
I think
But
that, go ahead. Sorry.
but how do you know to do that? You know what I mean? Some
Yeah.
people do, but I don't know. I just think we just know so little when we're that young, because the people who are around me, they didn't know anything either.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So we couldn't advise each other.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. Like that's something I realized in college. Like I think a common theme that I've like heard throughout the interviews was like I would have been a little bit more serious with my work. And I'm like, maybe I would have too. I think I was just so focused on that freedom aspect. And I mean I didn't do
Yeah,
it crazy, but like the freedom of no one's telling me to do my assignments. No one's taking me to school. No one's waking me up in the morning. Like I have that leisure. If I don't want to go to class, I don't have to go to class. Should I go to
yeah,
class? Yeah, I should, but I don't have to. If I don't want to do an assignment, no one's going to make me do an assignment. So I think, that idea of being more disciplined, but I think in some ways you learn how to be you learn how to be more disciplined, and you learn how to adjust, even though it may not be the discipline that you have later on in life. It's like, wow, at least I had some discipline to make it through college, because like some people don't have enough discipline to even finish through school. So I think that's like something I've thought about, and in doing these interviews I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is another similarity that I have with, and I think this is, like I said, a common theme for maybe not all college students, as you mentioned, but for a lot of college students going in, not really knowing what you want to do. You pick a major before you go to school, and if
yeah.
you take all of those classes, or like you said, not being exposed to so many different things, you kind of just stick to that one major, or those specific classes. And I think there are
Mm,
some areas in which I can relate with that. So
mm,
for the final question, um if you could describe your college experience in one word or one phrase, what would it be and why?
mm. Um, um, hmm. What would it be? I think it would be self-realization. Could that be one word?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Self-realization.
one word. It's a modifier.
Right. At least when I graduated, at least I knew what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
On the day of graduation. Okay, now I've graduated. Now I'm going to do this. For instance, I didn't have any instruction in the African American art when I was in school anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think I learned about Tanner. That's it. So I said, okay, I know now that I must teach myself. So
Mm-hmm.
I went to the public library almost every day to learn about all the African American artists I could learn about. And then when they had and I went to the rare bookstore to get books that were out of print, cost more, but it was worth it. And
Mm-hmm.
then when Amazon and other online publishers came into existence, everybody can collect any kind of thing they want. So I have a huge collection of African American art books that I'm very proud of. So it put me on a trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
my experience at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
So when I graduated, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
It pointed out, like, do this, do that, and you must do it on your own. You can't wait for somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that is another I'm just picking up every interview. Like I said, it just gets better and better on the word choices that you guys are using to describe, your college experience, because there's so many things that I can resonate with just as a recent graduate. It's like, wow,
Yeah.
yeah, self-realization. I'm an adult now. Although I'm 22, although, I'm still trying to figure out things, it's like you are an adult and you have to do things on your own. So
Yeah.
I do want to ask one more thing, if you're
Mhm.
willing to do it.
Sure.
If you have artwork, some of your artwork on your wall, would you point out some of the paintings and maybe describe them?
Okay. Well, the one I didn't do this on purpose, but
Yeah, no, but since
I'm not advertising. I'm in my dining room. But this one right here,
hmm
I don't know if I should touch I'm on my phone. I don't know if I should touch my phone to zoom in.
Oh, I can see it. It's very big. I can see it.
Okay. Well, when computers first came out, I was very resistant
hmm
because um, it was just so much to do. I had so much to do already. Now, where do you want to find a place in my life for the computers? But of course, just like everybody else, I found a place. But that background is a computer packing box,
Oh, wow.
the background.
hmm
Because when I lifted the computer out the box, I said, "Oh my goodness, look at this packing. It's
Wow.
fantastic. I'm going to turn it into an environment." So
Wow.
I was more excited about the packing than I was excited about the computer. So that background is a computer packing. Now I don't know if you remember the first computers looked like tea bags. That's what I thought. They were rounded. They had the backs, and they had the big bubble
hmm
back. The first, maybe you weren't born yet when they came out. Anyway,
No, I probably
so
wasn't born, but I've seen an older version of the
I
computer.
forgot the brand name, but it sat right in there. When I took the computer out, I was more excited about the packing than I was about the computer itself.
hmm
So I drew the packing because it looked like an environment, and then I put the little pieces of paper in there as plants, my
Wow.
imaginative plants. So that's why I found that fascinating at the time, because if you look at it, it just looks like you're in some kind of environment,
hmm
some kind of surreal environment. I think, I hope, but I don't think it translates. Oh, that's a computer packing.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it says goddess of the well, I see, I don't know what that says. Goddess of the peoples, I guess that's the title. And it was done in 70. Well, it was done in 95. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's so creative. I am not an artsy person, so when I see people who can
Mm-hmm.
do many things and have the gifting of arts, it's like, wow. I like me looking at that, I would have been like, let me see if I can piece it together. But when there's a story behind the art, I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense to me. So Miss Martina, thank you for sharing a piece
Oh,
of your artwork with us, and also thank you
thank
for taking the time to be interviewed today and share your experience and how your
you.
experience at Penn State came full circle and you coming back and presenting your art at the university. And I believe that your story and sharing pieces of your time at Penn State will be an addition to this project. And
Yeah.
also be an addition, I hope that people who watch this, they have the opportunity to go look at your artwork, because a lot of your artwork, I had a chance to look at it and it is magnificent. I'm just like amazed. I'm like, wow, you are very talented and an artist at heart. So thank you so much for taking the time to join
Yes.
me on this interview.
And thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the time you're spending. Thank you.